What are the biggest ways to screw up a transition to the RIA model? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 134. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where we help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, head on over to transitiontoria.com, where you can find all the resources we make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, on today's episode, a bit of a fun one. We're going to be talking about, well, fun but serious one. So what are some of the biggest ways you can essentially screw up a transition of your practice to the RIA model, with the idea being, let's identify what some of these are so you do not screw these things up along the way and along a transition with your practice. So I have 5 things I want to go through on this episode. There's other things that are very important to this whole process that I talk a lot about in these episodes that I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you about different topics. But these are 5 kind of the bigger ones that are important to understand. So we'll jump right in. So the first one is to not research the model thoroughly. So I am obviously a big believer in the RIA model. The entire business Transition to RIA is based on the premise that the wave of advisors and teams move into the RIA model will only continue to pick up steam as it has for years now, and that trend is going to continue. However, it is not for everyone. It is not for every advisor, not for every team, and you really need to understand, okay, what does it look like? Again, it's not for everyone. It comes with significant advantages, which I talk about in a lot of these episodes, whether it's economic advantages, flexibility advantages, but it also, no matter which pathway you take, typically comes with more responsibilities than you have now. So you want to understand, okay, yes, what are those advantages? That's nice. But what are those responsibilities? Because if you're not able or willing to handle those responsibilities, you will be screwing this up if you go through a transition and only find that out on the back end. So you want to educate yourself on, my practice, the profile of my practice, am I a fit for the model? And again, you have to look around and say, okay, does it make sense? And just because someone else has made the move, perhaps even someone, if you're at a wirehouse, perhaps even someone in your branch where you know someone well, or they're at the same firm you're affiliated with and they've made the move, well, hopefully they did their homework and concluded that it made sense for their practice. But just because it made sense for their practice doesn't necessarily mean it'll make sense for your practice. And so you want to ask those questions, get educated. What would my practice look like on the other side? Am I a candidate for it? Can I accommodate, for instance, the remaining commission assets that I have? If you manage money in a particular way, will I be able to continue to do that on a going forward basis? You want to figure these things out, because there's no reason trying to go through a transition and screwing all this up if you're not a good fit to begin with. And I would just say careful along this, who you take that advice from. So this is self-serving for me to say this. This is my entire focus. This is my entire world for almost 20 years, is helping advisors understand this. There are folks that will be out there trying to help you with this that have only been in the industry for 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, or they have no actual industry experience, and what they are now trying to consult to you on. Again, not to make a sales pitch, but I spent almost 20 years in the business before I shifted to trying to advise client or advisors and teams on this topic. So just careful who you take advice from. Do they actually have the experience to be giving you the advice of, is this a good fit for your practice? You screw that up, you could have some problems. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, even if you get past number 1, you don't want to screw this up by not researching the options available to you. So there are multiple ways to go into the RIA model. For some of you, it might be starting an RIA. Others of you, it might be joining an RIA. There's a flavor in the middle. But even within those pathways, there are multiple different flavors of that. So as an example, you shouldn't assume, and I see this at times, and it's not anyone maliciously doing it, they just don't realize that someone will be talking about, oh, do you want to join an RIA? And they might be critical. Well, I don't want to sell my practice. Okay, well, that's correct. Some RIAs you could join involve and even require that you sell your practice to them. Others, that's not their business model at all. You would remain 100% owner of your practice. You're 1099, you use your own brand. So there are a lot of different flavors of all these options, and you need to equally understand that of not only should you be going down this path, how do all of these options differ? What are the advantages and benefits of each of the pathways? What are the responsibilities you would have on each of those pathways? And again, don't make assumptions that, oh, I would never go down this route because of X. Well, perhaps you won't go down that route, but perhaps you're incorrect thinking that that's what's in your mind is the only way that particular pathway is accommodated. There's all different pros and cons to the different options that are out there in the marketplace. There's reasons you might choose one custodian over another. There's reasons you might choose one RIA over another if you were to join one. There's reasons you would choose your various vendors one over the other. It's just you need to understand and take the time to research these options. Again, if you screw that up and you find out after the fact, not that you can't make changes with a lot of these solutions, but it can be very disruptive, and it can indeed essentially screw up the transition if you don't figure this out until afterwards. And now it's to a degree too late, or it's going to be very disruptive to make a change. And kind of related to the prior point of careful who you take advice from is there's some very good people in this industry that can help you explore these pathways, but you have to be careful. You're essentially who you're talking to. So for instance, if through this whole process, the only thing you do is reach out to a single RIA to potentially join, well, and you talk to someone that could be very knowledgeable at that firm and very helpful, but they are representing that firm in that particular solution. And so perhaps you'll get lucky, and the one thing you look at and the one person you talk to is the right solution for you. But you might look at that and say, oh, that's not for me. I don't want that. And you discard every other option because you're not aware that there's other ways of doing this. And so if you only talk to one particular person, again, there's some very good people, very knowledgeable, but if they are representing one particular solution, whether that could be a custodian or it could be a support vendor, or it could be an RIA you could join, they are going to tell the story, to tell the line that aligns with what their offering is, and you need to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. As an example, I'll hear some RIAs that you could join. These are very good solutions, and sometimes someone will come to them with X dollars in AUM, and because they are in the business of trying to have you join their RIA, if you ask, well, what do you think if I just start my own RIA? And said, well, guess what their response is? Oh, you're not big enough to start your own RIA. Oh, you don't want to do that. Now, there might indeed be reasons you don't want to have your own RIA, and joining an RIA would be better for you. But if the sole person you're getting that advice from can only lead you down one pathway, you're risking screwing it up by not being aware of what those other options are. So again, number 2, do the research to understand all the options that you have available to you in the marketplace. Number 3, and these are in no particular order here, is, and this won't be an issue for most of you, but it could be an issue for some of you, is don't misjudge your client loyalty. So you will generally know deep down in your heart how loyal your clients will be to you. Obviously, a big part of a transition, a successful transition, is to have your clients follow you. What you don't want to do is go through this entire process and expend all this time, effort, and resources, and then wildly miscalculate how many of your clients come with you, and then maybe the new path no longer works, and again, you've completely screwed that up. For most of you that have had clients for a long time, they are loyal to you, much more so than they're ever loyal to the firm you're with now. And so if you were to make a change, they will almost generally always follow you. But there are some circumstances you have to think long and hard about. If you work in a bank setting and the majority of your clients, you didn't go out there and source on your own. You came to the bank at some point, they hired you, and you inherited all these clients. You realistically don't talk to them perhaps as much as you should or as often as would be ideal. And they're very loyal first to the bank. Perhaps they have their checking account there, and less as loyal to you as the individual. You need to be realistic. You're not going to move 95% of those folks on your new path. Now, you might move a big chunk of those, and that math might still work for you to go on a new path, but you need to be cognizant of, from a realistic standpoint, where's my client loyalty and how many are likely to follow me. Now, this, again, is generally a point of anxiety and concern for all advisors and teams, even if they say, oh yeah, my clients are going to follow me. Well, again, until it's actually happened, there is some degree of a little concern here. I would tell you from my 20-ish years plus doing this, that generally if you have gone through this entire process, so you have done like step one of this, or the thing not described, you've taken the time, should you even be exploring this? You've taken the time to research all your options. You've taken the time to understand the entire process for this. You've taken the time to understand and think through your client loyalty. I don't recall a single instance where someone has gone through all of that work and all of that due diligence and turned over all those stones and then turns out wildly miscalculated their client loyalty, and it was an epic failure of what actually moved over. Generally, there was some wishful thinking involved, the ones that fail, or there were some circumstances that necessitated that it didn't work out. For instance, if you've been terminated from your firm abruptly and you weren't planning any of this, and now you're trying to very quickly go on a new path, that's very disruptive. Your ability to move clients is going to be dramatically different than someone that's gone through this process at the normal methodical rate. So there are exceptions. Thankfully, for the majority, overwhelming majority of you, this is not at all going to be a problem. But that can absolutely screw up a transition, is if you misjudge your client loyalty as part of this. Number four, very important one as well, is a way you can screw this up is if you don't both receive legal advice on how to properly leave your current firm, and just as important, follow that legal advice. And so for some of you, you might already be in an independent setting, and this won't be as important of an issue. But even for you, there's still some variables involved, such as what client information you're perhaps allowed to take, regardless of your quote unquote independent status. There's still privacy laws or maybe rules of your firm of what you can or can't take, whether it's protocol. So you do need and want to get that legal advice, even on that independent, even if you're independent now on your new path. And certainly if you were at that wirehouse firm, that W-2, that traditional brokerage firm model, you will want to dig into that. And there are specialty attorneys that this is their essentially their primary and sole focus is to be very good at saying, what kind of firm are you coming from? What have you signed? By the way, if you have a copy, that's great. We can look at it. Or by the way, if you signed something 20 years ago and you have no idea where it is, well, hey, the law firms typically, because this is what they specialize in, will know generally what you might have signed. What is the language in there? What have you agreed to? And then how can we successfully have you depart and successfully have you move clients, being cognizant of possible non-solicits you might have, which are common in many instances, or potentially non-competes, or sometimes there's even non-client acceptance, which can get a little tricky. So you will want to know what is your legal landscape for departing and being able to take clients with you. And it's imperative, particularly those of you that are in that captive environment, to get that. It's a necessary expense associated with all this. I can help you get connected with these specialty attorneys. But again, not only do you need to get the advice, you then need to follow that advice. And so I always pay attention, and thankfully it doesn't happen all that often, but every so often the industry news, you'll see some article comes out and some firm has gone after an advisor that departed and has attempted to put a TRO, a temporary restraining order against them, or they're coming after them in other ways. I always open up the article and say, okay, let's understand what happened here. Let's learn from whoever this advisor is. And almost in every instance, they did something stupid. They did something ill-advised, that had they got legal advice and had they followed the legal advice, they would not have done that, and they would not have maybe made this mistake. So I'll give you just one blanket example, and occasionally you see something like this, where some departing team will have gone, and this is a very extreme example, will have gone back into their practice the night before they left, and the print logs show that they printed out 700 pages of client documents. Clearly, you were doing something you probably weren't supposed to do when you're doing it in the 11th hour at night, and the security camera has you with a box of printed paper walking out back to your car. You might think that doesn't happen. That does happen, unfortunately. Thankfully, not often, but you will see, if you're in the game long enough and pay attention long enough, mistakes like that being made. And at that point, you are screwing up your transition. It's going to be very hard to justify doing stupid things like that. But even if you think, hey, yeah, I'm not that stupid, I'm not going to do that kind of stupid thing. Again, there's other things that can trip you up you might not even be aware of. Again, whether it's protocol-related issues or Reg SP, privacy-related issues, you want that advice, get the advice, and follow the advice. Don't risk screwing that up. And then the final one is kind of related to, okay, hey, there's a legal process of how to navigate successfully away. There's a whole process for how to make this transition. The good news is, I don't care what kind of firm you're at now. I don't care how your practice is, what kind of clients you serve. You are not charting new territory here, transitioning your practice to the RIA model. There are 30,000 RIAs out there, not 30,000 advisors, 30,000 RIAs, about half SEC, half state registered. There's a couple 100,000 advisors underneath all of those RIAs. The industry has been around long enough to make this a much more seamless process than it would have been 20, 25 years ago. There's a methodical way you plan everything out. There's a methodical way you know who the solution providers are you need to lean on to help you with this. There's a process for setting the timeline for all of this. So you do not need to try to chart new territory, nor do you think you're charting new territory. You can ride the backs of people that have done this for years, if not decades now. You could add it all up to say, okay, what was the process that worked previously? What's the process for people generally in my situation, where I'm leaving from, what I aspire to do? Do I want to start an RA, join an RA? What's the best way to navigate that? And again, there's well choreographed processes established for how to do that. If you're not willing to learn that or willing to follow that process, you highly recommend risking screwing up your transition. And there's no reason to. When people have done it before and you can learn from them, just go through the same steps that they have gone to try to successfully have that transition. And again, that's a big part of what I help folks with, is just all my experience, all my years doing this, to say, this is how it typically works. Oh, by the way, yeah, this is how it works generally with someone leaving your firm or a practice of your size or a team, and here's the dynamics. Here's the things you need to be thinking about. Here's the process of how that typically plays out. You do not need to reinvent the wheel, but you need to get that advice. And again, you need to follow the advice if you want your highest chance of success of doing so. And as I reiterated a little earlier, just be careful with who you're getting that advice. Do they have the experience? Have they actually been in the industry, or they've just essentially been consultant on a topic they've never actually worked in, or do they have that backstory? And then again, there's some great people at the solution providers, but you just always need to remember they are going to be ultimately trying to essentially position their solution as what might be best for you in your practice. So with that, like I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales. This is the sort of topics I talk about with advisors and teams all day long: how to make a successful transition, and of course the opposite, how to not screw it up and have a bad transition. And that assumes you should even be transitioning in the first place, like we talked about. Should you dig into it? Does it make sense? That's what I can help you with from that very first part of the conversation all the way through the entire process. If it makes sense for you in your practice, happy to have that conversation with you as well. First things first, though, head on over to transitiontoria.com. As I said prior, you can find this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers, and at the top of every page is a contact link. Click on that and you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation, whether you want to talk about one of today's topics of how not to screw up a transition or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.